Hey everyone, it's Jeremy Signer, and welcome to a really interesting video that I've been meaning to make for quite some time now. It's a little bit different, a little bit hardware based. Let's talk about it. So the M1 Mac, Apple's latest machine built with their Apple Silicon processors and integrated memory and GPUs. How does it perform for us texture and material artists? Is it ready for professional use? All this and more in a two-part series where I answer the question, can you texture on an M1 Mac? This first part is about Substance Designer. As of the recording of this video, Substance Designer has not yet been optimized for the M1 Apple Silicon architecture, which means it's going to have to be translated on the fly from Intel code to Apple's native code using something called Rosetta 2. The question is, how well does it do it? And am I going to notice a difference between this and what I currently use, which is my PC laptop? To give you some context on what I'm currently using, I'm using a couple-year-old laptop PC with an NVIDIA GTX 1070 GPU, an 8th gen Intel Core i7 CPU, and 16 gigabytes of memory. Now the next question is, which Mac am I going to test? Well, the answer is this, the base model 8 gigabyte MacBook Air, the first version of its kind. I'm excited. So why the base model? Well, technically it's the only model that we have. But also, it is a good idea to give us that baseline to see where we can go from here. From what I hear, we shouldn't be very disappointed. All right, so let's fire up Substance Designer and let's see what we got. Okay, here we go. All right, first thing I want to do is I want to open Substance Designer. Let's see if it runs on the M1 Mac. This would be a very short video if it didn't. All right, Substance Designer. Nice, that didn't take very long at all. All right, let's create a new substance. I'll do a PBR metallic roughness, and I'll create just a new graph, 2K, awesome. So the first thing I want to test out is to see if the 3D view works. Now, we have it set to OpenGL right now, and so, interesting fact. So Apple's trying to get a lot of developers to use what's called Metal, which is their platform so that graphics-intensive applications can talk directly to the hardware built in, and no overhead, and it leads to faster latency, and it does a lot of really great things for battery life and just maintaining the system in a very functional way. OpenGL is now kind of getting the boot. It's kind of getting kicked out. But because a lot of apps still use OpenGL, we can use it with what I was mentioning before, which is Rosetta 2. So here we are, OpenGL, 3D view, and it seems to be working rather well. It's very responsive, very fast. I can see I'm getting some jagged edges here, so I wonder if I can change that by going to the Preferences, 3D View. We have this Viewport Scaling option, so if I set this to None, hit OK. There we go, those jagged edges are gone, and still running pretty smooth. I can Command, Shift, and right-click. In this case, it's 2 fingers on the trackpad, so right-click, and I can move the light there. That's great. I'm going to go back and change this to Viewport Scaling set to Auto, hit OK, just so we get some better performance here and just maximize what we can do. So now let's try the iRay renderer. So if I go to the Preferences here, again, and then go to iRay, you can see under hardware, we're just using the CPU here, so no GPU functionality as of yet. But then again, like I said, this app has not been optimized for Apple's hardware just yet. So let's go to Renderer, iRay. Wow, okay, so here we are, just using the CPU, and I'm saying that's really good. That's really good. Let me rotate the light again. I'd say that's really responsive, pretty usable. Cleans up rather fast. I can zoom in and out here, Option and 2-finger clicking and dragging. That's great. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how to use Substance Designer on a laptop. I think it might be a little confusing because normally Substance Designer is used with a 3-button mouse, and that makes it really easy. A lot of 3D applications are designed with that in mind, but we only have a trackpad here with one button technically. So how do we do that? So what we can do is we can hold the Command button, and then we can use 2 fingers to click and pan around. So that's 2 fingers while holding the Command button and clicking, which is technically like a right click for the Mac. That's good. We can also Option and 2-finger click and then move up and down to scroll. You can also just use 2 fingers, but it's very sensitive. So I'm just gonna use Option and 2 fingers to get better control of that, and I can pan around, and that's basically all I need to do in order to use Substance with a laptop. So what I want to do next is I want to demonstrate how I would use Substance Designer just to quickly sketch out a quick rock material. So this isn't going to be very slowed down and methodical and step-by-step and explanatory, mainly like how my other tutorials are, but more about what I'm thinking about as we go along, as I'm using the software to see how the performance is doing and if there's any hitches or hiccups or if it's just going to run smoothly. Fingers crossed it runs pretty well. So let's start creating that rock material. All right, so let's go ahead and let's create a blend node. I usually like to make a final blend here. Great, so let's connect this like I normally would to my normal nodes. Create an ambient occlusion node. And let's connect this to that and the height. And so what I'm going to do next is create a tile sampler, spacebar, tile sampler. And I'm going to create a bunch of paraboloids. So I'm just going to make, let's do something like 4 by 6. That's good. Paraboloid. I'm just going to scale it up. Yeah, so far the 2D performance is doing pretty well. Do a little bit of scale random, position random, and then let's just really scale these up. And I'll go and change the color random. Get some neat shapes there. Now I'm going to duplicate this, Command D or Control D. Let's create a couple more. So I'm going to do something like 8. We'll just create a couple more like that. And then I'm going to invert it. Create a new blend. Nodes do add pretty quickly, which is nice to see. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to connect these up and set it to min darken. So now we can sort of see what's happening here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this to rounded cylinder. And I've been in Iray this whole time. I didn't even notice. That's cool. I wonder if I could just continue to work in Iray. Okay. So there's a funny thing that's happening here if I connect it to my views. You see we've got these weird bands happening here, and that's because you can see that one of my nodes here is changing to 8-bit. And that's because I think I set my graph when I created my graph to default to 8-bit. So what you can do is you can double click on the graph, go to the output format, change this to absolute, and then we can just go to 16-bit, and that should go away. Perfect. Okay. So now you can see this is set to 16. If it's just one node that does it, you can go to that node and then go to its output format. You can see it says 8 bits per channel here. Let me just set this to absolute and then 16 bits. I'm going to go to OpenGL here for a second, and I'm just going to change the intensity of my normal map to something really high for now, like 10, and let's put some tessellation on this. See how well this M1 architecture does by adding tessellation. So all the way maximum. Let's bring up that ambient occlusion. So far, so good. In fact, I wonder if I could just do this in Iray. We can try. Great, so I'm just going to dial down my roughness. And this is what I do when I normally work on a material. I know I'm going a lot faster than I normally would in a tutorial. Let's just darken this a bit, just so I can see what's going on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is add another, actually I'll just duplicate my tile sampler and just add a few more. So let's do something like 12. Sure. Oh, I'm in the wrong one. Make sure you double click on your tile sampler after you duplicate it. Otherwise, you might be editing the wrong one. Cool. And I don't want this to take too long because the point of this video is mainly just to see what the performance is. But I'm just going to go at my normal speed that I'd be working at. Just subtract these. And I can't believe I'm running this in Iray at the same time. This is really cool. Great. That's looking okay. Let's directional warp. Just push these shapes along. Okay. Maybe something more. That might be too much. Just dial it back. And I think I'm going to switch to OpenGL to see what this looks like. I think that's a little too much still. I think I might be subtracting too many of these shapes. Just dial it back a little. Cool. Do a little more warping. Just warp it by itself this time. Okay, yeah, still getting good performance. Now I think what I want to do next, let's get a few more details in here. So I'm going to pull out do like a safe transform and like tile it, and also get a slope blur grayscale. Do a clouds 2. Yeah, so you can see this is just going at my normal speed, and it's no hitches or anything. I'm not getting held up by the CPU at all. Let's warp it. Great. We can get some of these small little cracks going on here. I can increase the intensity and really flush those out if I'd like to. So we can do some quick cracking. I'll do something like we'll do a splatter circular. Just bring down the size. Set the disk, cool, and I'll just get the luminance random. Great. So I'm just making a small crack generator to create some of those nice organic looking. Great. Let's just increase the pattern amount. Grab those edges. It's almost torturous for me to go so fast for a recording. I want to explain every little detail. Do like a directional warp. Let me get a crystal. Yeah, I'm impressed with this performance. It's computing all of these nodes rather quickly. That's good. Let's do a slope blur, clouds. Just hit Option there to create a dot node. Great. Zoom in. Looking a bit intense. Why don't I add a bevel node in between here and just take down the distance. Okay, we've got some cracks here. Let's warp it here, directional warp. And I'll just multiply this on. Let me switch back into iRay again. I'm just amazed at how quick it is. Okay, so multiply. Cool, let's take this all the way down. Get some of those cracks. Excellent. I'm going to increase the pattern amount to, I don't know, let's go 80. Just bring this up. Great. And maybe what I'll do is change the mask. So the last thing I want to do is just add some micro detail. So I'll just blend in a quick fractal sum base and slope blur that. And let's use multiply. Auto levels this so we're getting all of that nice detail. And let's add one more fractal sum base just for some extra tactile detail. Just multiply that on. And we have a rock. So yeah, we have a quick rock material here. I'm very impressed with how quickly it was able to process all these things, but now let's push it to the max a little bit. Let's start cranking up some of these values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the output size here, and I'm going to change this. We've been working at 2K. Let's see what happens if I change this to 4K. How quickly is this going to reprocess all of these nodes? That's pretty good. It's done. Okay, great. So we're at 4K now. Here's the 3D viewport performance. I can zoom in. We can see some more of that detail in the pores of the rock. That's cool. I can zoom out here. That didn't take very long. What if I need to change some of these properties? Let's change one of these tile samplers. How about this one? I'll just change the random seed here. See how quickly that propagates. Great. That's pretty normal. I can change it back here. Nice. Okay. So let's push this even further. Let's go 8K. Now, when I change it to 8K on my PC, depending on how many nodes there are, it could take about a minute to update a graph. So let's just see how quickly this goes. Parent size, 8K. All right, and now this is pretty overkill unless you're doing something very specific for some high quality textures. You probably wouldn't want to work in 8K, but you can because everything's procedural. It's one of the magic things about Substance Designer. And wow, okay, we're rendering the cache now, so we have the outputs here already. This is already in 8K. And you can see going through the nodes there. Looking like it's just about done. Done. Wow, and here we are in 8K. So I can move around like I normally would in the 3D view, and of course zoom in and see all that juicy 8K detail that we have. Same thing here in our 2D view. Yeah, and now let me change that same parameter in 8K, 8K on a MacBook Air here. Okay, and then let's just go and change that random seed. It's going to have to re-render all of the outputs. And like I said, this is kind of ridiculous, but let's see what happens. So it's, oh, I've tried clicking on the 3D view. It gave me the beach ball there for a second, but there we go. It's back rendering and it's changed. Yeah, so suffice it to say, maybe 8K isn't the best option if you want to try iterating through a bunch of things. That makes sense. But there you go. That's how quickly it goes through and changes a graph that has a good amount of nodes for a simple material. And it renders fine. Let's change this to iRay just to see what that does in 8K. And there we go. We're in iRay. Still rendering pretty quickly with those iterations. Great. Let's go back to 2K, and now everything's going to happen really fast again. Let's go back and change that random seed, and it's like nothing now. So pretty good performance overall, I'd say. To sum things up, if I want to create a bunch of materials on the fly, on the go, when we do that eventually, or if I need to make some quick adjustments, say in a meeting or in a studio where I'm showing off some materials and want to show off what some of these parameters do, it seems like I can absolutely do that on this base model M1 MacBook Air. It looks like it's powerful enough to do everything that I need it to do. Use all the nodes to the fullest, be able to experiment, change the resolutions, the random seeds, and not wait as it hangs up and tries to eventually catch up and show me what my materials look like. It just allows me to go through the iteration process very quickly, which is what I need in order to get a material done with a deadline. I'm really excited to see where this software goes in the future, how the performance increases when it's not translating on the fly, when it's built natively for this architecture, because it does really get me excited to see that we can use Substance Designer on the Mac. Would you switch to the Mac either now or when Apple releases their Pro version of their Apple silicon-based machines? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you'd like to see any more testing in Substance Designer, I'm absolutely down to see how far we can push this machine, see what it's capable of. Right now, it looks like it can absolutely do everything we need it to in Substance Designer, which is very exciting to see. Now, this is only part 1 of what I'm doing to test the Mac with the Substance software. In part 2, we're going to be looking at Substance Painter. So if you're interested to see part 2 of this series, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I make tons of videos about texturing and Substance Designer. I make lots of tutorials, and I've got a really cool series where I create a bunch of really awesome textures from cool video games and feature films. Also, if you like this video, hit the thumbs up. It lets me know that you like watching videos like these and that you'd like to see more. It means so much. So stay tuned for part 2 of this series. I'm Jeremy Seiner. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.